secretary. Well, if you're secretary to the governor, it means you have many, many opportunities to make lots of money, and he did, and the size of his house indicates just how much skimming could go on then as well as it can today if you're in a high political position. This is the portrait. Is this all out of focus, or is it just my eyes? Can you all see that? Is that focused? Wow, up and down. Why don't you do that?
I'm doing it.
Oh, okay.
Is that helpful or annoying?
No,
If we get to the bottom and you can see it.
Wait. Magic. This portrait hangs in the dining room in Government House, and this is the Sharp family, bought by one of the wives of one of the governors. I think Governor Nice's wife bought it. But here you see Governor Horatio Sharp. He's the military brother. Here you see the one in the clergy guard. He's the one who was the clergyman to the Prince of Wales, and there are a couple lawyers in there. And a very prominent family who traditionally served people at the highest levels in British government. So well connected. Good governor for Maryland. He had just barely arrived when the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, broke out. This was a fight over conflicting claims of Britain and France, primarily over the area west of the Alleghenies, the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. And so it was one of those European wars that was fought primarily here in North America. Governor Horatio Sharp, because he had this military background, was appointed commander of all of the British forces in North America until General Edward Braddock, who was the overall commander, arrived. So for his first few months as governor here, he had to spend time up in New York and running around trying to figure out what the British troop strengths were and where the enemy were and that sort of thing. But it is an indication of the high regard he was held in by people back home in terms of his military background. Edward Braddock finally arrives and punches Braddock's Road through western Maryland, basically Route 40 today. It was an arduous task, but British soldiers don't, kind of creep through the woods. They march in formation 4 abreast, so you had to clear a road all the way over the Alleghenies. They arrived there, and Braddock had the first skirmish with the French and their Indian allies, and Braddock was killed. So it didn't last too long, but it's still called Braddock's Road. Sharp and the lower house of the General Assembly, once he gets back from his military efforts, are immediately embroiled in a long-running and heated debate over the defense of the western frontier. Governor Sharp wanted to build a fort out in the extreme edges of settlement in western Maryland. It's what became Fort Frederick, and you can still visit Fort Frederick today. He felt that was necessary, from his military perspective, it was necessary to have a substantial fortification there so that the scattered population out there, if the Indians and the French attacked, had a place where they could kind of be secured. It would also be a place where we could station troops that could go out and confront the enemy if they made their way into Maryland. And this was all going on Maryland's western border. The lower house of the General Assembly said, that's just a swell idea. In exchange for granting all that money, we want to control the fee bill that sets the fees of the governor on down to the clergyman and everyone in between. That's a good tit for tat. We'll give you the money you want to build the fort. You give us control over what proprietary officials are paid. He wasn't going to do that, and so it went back and forth and back and forth. And finally, thank you. Finally, they worked out an agreement that Sharp was horrified to have to tell the proprietor about back home in England, who wanted more and more money. To get the money to build Fort Frederick, he had to agree to 2 things. Number 1, to tax all the manorial land owned by the proprietor here in Maryland. Now, the proprietor in the 17th century had ordered that at least 10,000 acres in each county be set aside as a manor that would be his own property that could be rented out, that he would get the income from it. Some of the counties had much larger areas, some of the older counties smaller areas, but there was there were well over 150,000 acres set aside for the proprietor, which of course didn't pay taxes because it was owned by the proprietor. Well, the legislature says we pay tax on our land, the proprietor should pay tax on his land too. So he had to agree to do that, and then secondly, to double tax Catholics. I mean, Catholics already in Maryland since 1715 were more persecuted legally in Maryland, this Catholic colony, than they were in any other British colony. Now, as of the mid-1750s, they're also double taxed. It led Charles Carroll of Carrollton's father, Charles Carroll of Annapolis, to seriously considering selling off his assets in Maryland and removing the family and its vast fortune to Louisiana. He didn't do that. It was complicated. It's kind of like Trump trying to break up his empire to be president. It's hard when you actually get down to the details. So in any case, that's what Sharp had to agree to get the money to build Fort Frederick. So they built it, but at great political cost. Okay, now we're going to talk about Maryland, this critical period, 13 years leading up to the War for Independence. The French and Indian War ended in 1763. It was a great British victory. We defeated our traditional enemy, the French. And when I say we, I mean that. Remember, Maryland is a part of England. So when we won the French and Indian War, it includes Maryland citizens as well as the citizens back home co-equally. It's we. It was particularly great in this case because the war had been primarily fought just on our western border. So great British victory that we, of course, shared wholeheartedly in. Marylanders were enormously proud to be British citizens of this great military power that defeated the traditional French enemies. And yet just 13 years later, now think about it. 13 years is not a long time, particularly given the difficulty of communication at that time and travel and, no internet, no tweets. I mean, how the heck are you going to get your ideas around? In just 13 years, Maryland would be joining with the other colonies in declaring independence. I mean, really a remarkable transformation in just 13 years. John Adams famously called it a great transformation in the hearts and minds of the people. And so that's what we're going to look at now. The transformation in Maryland, first of all, had to be greater than it was in really any of the other colonies. Maryland's political leaders were fundamentally conservative, didn't want to rock the boat. We were tied directly economically to Britain. The tobacco economy meant we in Virginia were tied more closely than any of the other colonies to the mother country because all of our tobacco had to be sold in Europe. We had an overwhelmingly English stock in terms of our population. The political system was controlled by men who wanted to preserve a stable political system. There was tremendous wealth imbalance by this point. Of very few very wealthy people and the vast majority middle class and the huge underclass, which meant that most of the population of Maryland were removed entirely from the political process. They had no vote at all. Virtually all of the problems with Maryland pitted the people against the proprietor, not against the Crown and Parliament. For well over a century, we've been fighting tooth and nail with the proprietor over a vast variety of issues, and very often we turn to Britain, to Parliament, to our rights as English citizens to try to win the argument with the proprietor, exercising those king-like authorities over his colony of Maryland that were granted by the Charter of 1632. Britain, for its part, had huge problems as well. The national debt had doubled during the French and Indian War. So that was a huge problem faced by George III and his ministers. Plus, they had a vast new territory that they had to defend, protect, and govern. All of that area west of the Appalachian Mountains, the Mississippi watershed, the Ohio River, they were going to have troops permanently stationed there, and the French would come right back in again, and that was going to cost money every year on an ongoing basis. It seemed perfectly reasonable to people in Parliament that the colonists should pay at least some share in these additional costs and some share of the cost of the war, because most of it was fought right here in North America, and these continuing costs were going to be to defend the colonies from future French incursions. So, government always thinks it's perfectly reasonable for the citizens to pay more taxes. The problem is, citizens rarely think it's perfectly reasonable to pay more taxes, and that's what we started out with in 1763, that basic problem of government wanting more money and the citizens not wanting to pay it. Just quickly, there are several steps in this process. The first, the Sugar Act of 1764. This focused on the molasses trade between the Caribbean and the rum distillers were primarily in New England, Rhode Island, Connecticut, that area. So it was basically that trade where molasses would be exported from the Caribbean, go up to New England, where it was refined into rum and also sugar and that sort of thing. Maryland wasn't involved in the trade at all. So while it outraged New England merchants, and particularly the smugglers, smuggling molasses was very big business by merchants up in New England. Marylanders just thought, well, those smugglers up in New England were getting their comeuppance, and we weren't very affected by it at all. It did lead to the beginning of organized resistance against a British policy and that famous slogan, no taxation without representation. That emerged after the Sugar Act of 1764. And you'll hear it throughout the next years. The Sugar Act raised very little additional revenue because of people just simply refusing to obey the law. And so Parliament repealed it in 1766. A failure. The second attempt to raise more taxes was the famous Stamp Act of 1765. This was a stamp act that required stamp taxes like you pay on, you see them on bottles of liquor now on the top, there will be a stamp tax. If you have a deed or something like that, there will literally be stamp taxes along the margins. That kind of actual applied stamp to a number of things, all legal documents, licenses, newspapers, playing cards, and dice. It was a stupid act because it applied specifically and precisely to the people who held political control and power in all of the colonies. Lawyers, merchants, printers, the gentry, the people who could, who filed legal documents, who needed license for taverns, who read newspapers, who had the leisure to play cards and dice. It didn't affect the vast majority of the population who could do any of those things. It affected the political elite in all of the colonies, and it resulted in swift and vocal reaction everywhere. Maryland's response was led by Jonas Green, the publisher of the Maryland Gazette. This dramatic gesture of the Maryland Gazette was published once a week, and he started running these huge, big, thick mourning bands across the top of the paper, calling the newspaper the Maryland Gazette Expiring, because the Stamp Act was due to go into effect on November 1st of 1765, and he was saying he would never print on stamp paper, so this act was killing the Maryland Gazette as of November 1st. He also adopted the famous wood stamp of the O Fatal stamp that appeared in the lower right-hand column on the front page of every Maryland Gazette. Yeah.
What was the reaction to the Stamp Act in any of the other English colonies?
Well, it was not favorably, was not well received anywhere. There is a good book by Samuel Morgan's The Stamp Act Crisis. I forget Morgan's first name. The Stamp Act Crisis. It goes through state by state, or colony by colony. The press led the opposition in all of the colonies. Samuel Chase and William Pecott, two very young lawyers, formed a Sons of Liberty organization here in Annapolis. They actually met under the late lamented Liberty Tree on St. John's College campus, which was not that point, of course. So organized resistance in the form of that Sons of Liberty that became, started in Boston, became famous elsewhere. There was a merchant by the name of Zachariah Hood, kind of a minor merchant here in Maryland, or Annapolis, but he had a store here and he had a warehouse. He happened to be in London at the time the Stamp Act was announced, and he got this brilliant idea. They were going to need a Stamp Act collector for each colony. He was in London, and so he made his way down to the office responsible for sending the stamps to all the colonies and appointing the stamp collectors. And he said, how about me? I'll be the stamp collector for Maryland, and I'm going back home now. Perfect. What a coincidence. He said, sounds good to us. And so they signed him up as the stamp collector, gave him a big box full of stamps to bring home on the voyage to Maryland. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 ships left London prior to him. Of course, he'd gone around bragging that he was the stamp collector for Maryland. So when the ship comes into the Annapolis harbor, the dock is full of people jumping up and down and holding signs, and kind of like the airport last night. And he thought this was fantastic. Word obviously proceeded that he was the new Crown stamp collector. He was going to be given quite a rousing welcome when he arrived. Then he got closer and he saw signs that had a BWI airport last night, killed Trump and things like that. And an effigy of him that was being lit on fire and things like. All of a sudden he realized he was in very, very deep trouble. He made his way to Governor Sharp's office and said, "You got to protect me. I'm a Crown official." And Sharp says, "What am I going to do? I have no way to protect you. My advice to you is after dark, get out of town fast and don't come back." In the meantime, rowdies in town, led probably by Samuel Chase, tore down and simply destroyed Samuel Chase's or Zachariah Hood's warehouse. So it completely ruined him. It was the first destruction of property in Maryland due to opposition to these British policies. The act did go into effect on November 1st, and all of the courts in Maryland closed down, from the highest to all of the county courts, because none of them would process stamped paper. So if you couldn't process stamped paper, you couldn't do any legal action. So this went on for a number of days. Finally, about 3 weeks later, the justices in Frederick County held court session and processed legal paper per usual. They used the excuse that since there were no stamps, they couldn't be faulted for processing unstamped paper because there was no way to have stamped paper. That nice little argument in Frederick County caught on very rapidly, and within a few days, all of the courts in Maryland reopened, and that is remembered today in a legal half-holiday in Maryland called Repudiation Day. November 23rd, 1765, we all should get up and say, "Happy Repudiation Day" to our spouse. That caused some questions. Happy repudiation, dear. Dear. And it's November 23rd, 1765, a legal half-holiday in Maryland, in Frederick County only. And probably no one in Frederick County knows about it. There it is. Finally, the Stamp Act was repealed because it caused simply too much political dissension and chaos in Parliament. And so on April 10th, the Maryland Gazette triumphantly resumed publication without the morning dance, announcing that Parliament had repealed the Stamp Act. So the colonists are getting very much emboldened now. They've gotten to repeal the Sugar Act, now the much more important Stamp Act.
Here we go.
The third thing that happened, see now, in all of the other colonies, you had a period of quiet between 1766 and 1768 when the next parliamentary law comes along. Everyone can kind of take a breath and relax. Not here in Maryland. Just as the Stamp Act is being repealed, a clergyman arrives in Annapolis by the name of Reverend Bennett Allen. He claimed to be a special friend of the proprietor. Not a whole lot of recommendation in that as far as most Marylanders were concerned. He went to the governor and demanded the richest parish in Maryland, said the proprietor had promised it to him. Now, these parishes, the value of the parish depended on how many taxables lived there. And you might think the Annapolis St. Anne's would be the richest parish, but it wasn't. The richest was in far off Frederick County. The All Hallows Church in Fredericktown was the richest parish in Maryland because it encompassed all of western Maryland, and everyone out there had to pay taxes, and it accumulated to quite a large annual income. Governor Sharp, there was an elderly and much beloved priest out at All Hallows in Frederick, or All Saints in Frederick, rather, and so it wasn't vacant, and he refused to dismiss him, this old, much beloved priest from All Saints in Frederick. He installed Bennett Allen instead in St. Anne's, the most prestigious Anglican church in all of Maryland. And you would have thought he would have been happy about that, but he certainly wasn't. He drank excessively. He went around town with this floozy-looking woman on his arm that he introduced as his sister. And he went to the governor shortly after he was settled in St. Anne's and demanded a second parish, which is plural office holding, which was against the law in Maryland. Demanded the income from a second parish to keep him in liquor. Can you imagine? So he was quite a character. And then he began, for reasons that are unclear, attacking the powerful Delaney family.